Of all the trees that are in the wood, the most familiar surely is holly, especially at this time of year when the glossy evergreen leaves really stand out now that the deciduous leaves of most other trees have fallen. But of course it's the berries, particularly at this time of year, that catch the eye, although it's not our eyes that they have evolved to catch, but the eyes of the birds that will disperse the seeds. And you may have noticed that you get berries only on some holly trees, because individual holly trees are either male or female, and it's only the female trees that will produce the berries that are an important component in the diet of birds, particularly in a hard winter, birds like thrushes and blackbirds. A hard winter, which this is not, and this explains why this is such a prolific year for berries on holly. Just beside this holly tree is one with yellow berries. This is a garden variety selected because we find the yellow berries attractive. They don't have much appeal for birds. Most woodland trees, you may remember, have separate male and female flowers, but they are produced on the same tree. And they're pollinated by the wind, which is why they flower early in the year when there are no leaves on the trees to get in the way of pollen being carried from the male flowers to the female flowers. But holly is pollinated by insects, so it flowers later in the year, in early summer, when there are more insects around to pollinate the flowers. And what attracts the insects to the flowers is the abundant nectar which they produce. But the most eye-catching of the many insects associated with holly is not one of these pollinating visitors, but a butterfly that lays its eggs at the base of the unopened flower buds in May and June. This is the holly blue butterfly, though I suppose it should more properly be called the holly and ivy blue, because it has a second brood in late summer which feeds on the flowers of ivy. Though if neither of these two food plants is available, it is known to get along fine with furs. The spiky leaves, along with what looks like an impenetrable skin, like a coat of armour on the top and bottom of the leaf, the cuticle, is of course a device to protect the leaves from browsing animals. And here's a fascinating detail. You'll notice that it's only the leaves towards the bottom of the tree that are spiky. Further up, the trees are without spines because they have no need of them, since they're out of reach of browsing animals, which can be surprisingly fond of holly leaves. In fact, at one time, holly leaves were fed as winter fodder to animals. Goats are particularly fond of them, and in the wild, deer and hares. This thick, impenetrable cuticle also protects holly from insect herbivores, with one exception. There is one insect that feeds on holly to the exclusion of everything else. If you look closely, on many trees you will notice a pale blotch on some of the leaves. This is caused by the grazing activities of the larva of a particular species of fly, unsurprisingly known as the holly leaf miner, which lays its eggs in early summer before the leaf develops its thick skin, and the larva eats its way through the nutritious leaf tissue sandwiched between the ceiling and floor provided by the thick skin of the leaf. Among the many remarkable things about this is that the grub is able to get all the nutrients and vitamins it needs from this monotonous diet, the only food it eats. It would be like you or I subsisting from cradle to grave on cabbage. Holly is a common element in place names. There's probably no more familiar example in this part of the country than Drumcullen, which is Drumquillen in Irish, Holly Ridge, Quillen being the Irish word for holly. And small and slow growing though it is as trees go, in an earlier, essentially self-sufficient Ireland where all the tools, or most of the tools used in household and farm had to be made locally from locally sourced timber, it was an important tree. In fact, it was important enough to be ranked in the top rank of trees in the laws of Gaelic Ireland, the nobles of the wood. It was particularly favoured for making the shafts of carts because it doesn't shatter. It's a very tough timber, which is why my walking stick is made of holly, because it will break my fall without breaking itself. The wood is ivory white, but could be mistaken for ebony when it is dyed black. The bark was widely used to make a limey glue for catching small birds. The tree is also steeped in the folklore of magic, and interestingly it is mentioned several times in the Táin Bó Cúailnge. But there is something unusual about holly this year. Some trees are starting to flower. The reason is that even though it's coming up to Christmas, there hasn't been a cold spell up to now, and this has fooled the holly into thinking spring is on the way and it's time to flower. But there are few insects, so there will be no berries from these flowers. It means also that the trees will not have the reserves to flower next year, apart from which holly trees rarely produce an abundant crop 2 years running anyway. Of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown, is nowadays not because of its use in making cart shafts or for walking sticks, but because of its association with Christmas. With the coming of Christianity, the ancient lore of trees and of plants in general was overlain with a new spiritual veneer, and particular distinguishing characteristics of individual species took on a new symbolic meaning. And there's no better example of that, perhaps, than holly. In the Roman Empire, branches of holly were used as decoration in the celebration of the midwinter festival of Saturnalia. And this was replaced by the celebration of Christ's birth when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And holly was given a new meaning. It's every feature associated with some element of the Christian story, particularly the Passion, symbolised by the blood-red berries and the thorny leaves. Nowhere more familiarly celebrated than in one of the loveliest and oldest of English Christmas carols.